to announce. I have a pleasure to announce the speaker of today's seminar, Sam Blake. He will be talking about solving Zodiac 340 cipher, which is connected to the famous case of serial killer in California in the 60s, 70s. Let me tell you a little bit about Sam. Sam is a researcher who is actually working with Melbourne University in Australia, if somebody is from overseas. He was doing, he's done his PhD in mathematics, and now he's a research fellow in the Department of Computing, I think. So his interests are quite ranging. He is interested in spread spectrum watermarking, cryptography, which is obvious from the topic of the seminar, machine learning, and symbolic computations. Sam, the floor, if I can say so, is yours.
Thanks, Joseph. Yeah, look, thank you, and thanks to Dali and originally Kristen Moore for the invite to speak today. I believe David Ranchak's tuning in from Virginia in the United States, and it would be well past his bedtime over there. So thanks, David, if you're in the audience somewhere for tuning in. Giving a talk on the Zodiac ciphers to you will be quite challenging. David's one of the people who solved this cipher with me. So today we're talking about the quest to solve the Zodiac 340 cipher, and I think the quote here from Captain Parker Hitt is quite relevant to our work. We certainly required perseverance, careful methods of analysis, intuition, and we did have I think we had a little bit of luck also. We'll just go over a brief history of the Zodiac case. It's a pseudonym of an American serial killer who operated in the late 60s and early 1970s. He murdered at least 5 people in Northern California. He certainly claimed to have killed many more people, but those claims are sort of unverified. He was a shameless self-promoter. The Zodiac killer communicated extensively, not only with law enforcement, but with all of the local newspapers of the time. I think he sent something like 30 letters into these places. And this is an unsolved case. It's one of the most famous open cold cases of all time. So one of the reasons why he sort of had this notoriety was not only did he like to send in letters, but he liked to communicate using ciphers or cryptograms. And he sent in 4 in total, as far as I know. The first one that he sent in July of '69 was the 408 cipher, which is on the left, which he sent in 3 parts. And the one on the right, which is what all the fuss is about, this is the one that we've just solved recently, called the 340. And he sent that one in November. And then there were 2 much shorter ciphers, one with 32 characters and the other with 13. The one the thing that's interesting about the 13 character cipher is he claims that he's put his name in it, which kind of seems far-fetched, but no, neither of these have ever been solved. So I'll go over briefly what encipherment schemes were ultimately used in the 340. So a homophonic substitution cipher is the first form, and you'd all be aware of something called a simple substitution, which just replaces plain text letters with a ciphertext alphabet. And here we've just made a random rearrangement of all the letters from A to Z. And so something like X marks the spot would be replaced with, so X would be replaced with an O, and then M would be replaced with an A, and so on and so on. There's 26 factorial different keys to this, but this is one of these cases where just because you have a large search space doesn't mean it's cryptographically strong. So this can be easily broken using frequency analysis. So a way in which to get around the frequency analysis attack is to disguise the frequency using multiple letters. So you can, or multiple multiple cipher symbols. So, for example, the most commonly occurring letters in the English language per Wikipedia is E with 13%, T, A, O, and N. So what we do is we map these to multiple cipher symbols, and this flattens out the letter frequencies. So as more than 26 characters are required, in this case, the Zodiac invented his own symbols, and some of them are there, like a half-filled square and an empty square and a filled square and backwards Ks and backwards Qs and so on. He was quite creative in his creation of his symbols. So to give you an example, this is the first paragraph or so of the code book by Simon Singh. And suppose we want to encipher the letter E to the following four symbols: a triangle, a square, a B, and a backwards Q. So we would begin by identifying where all those E's are. And then for the first E, we would replace it with the triangle. Then the second E, we would replace it with the square. And then the third E, we would replace it with the B. Then the fourth E would be with the backwards Q. And then we just cycle round. So the next one would go back to being the triangle and so on. And then that would be the encipherment of all of the E's. Here we've just cyclically gone through those ciphertext symbols, but you could just randomly choose them as well. And that would also help to disguise the encipherment of the plain text. Another type of enciphering scheme is called a transposition cipher. And so this is where the actual plain text is just shifted according to some regular system. Importantly, that regular system needs to have an inverse, so it has to be a bijective function. A simple example of this would be a columnar transposition, where you just write the plain text out in rows and then you read it in columns according to some predetermined order. So, for example, if we wanted to encipher the plain text for centuries, queens, and generals have relied on, we would write it out in rows. And then in this case, we just haven't permuted the columns there. We've just taken the columns in their order. But then we would read it down the columns in order to get our encipherment. So it would start F, K, N, V. So that's the first column. O, I, D, E would be the second column, and so on. So it well and truly conceals the underlying plain text there. So let's talk about the first cipher that the Zodiac sent in, which was in July of '69. So he mailed this one into the press in 3 distinct segments, which are on the right. And one went to the Vallejo Times Herald, another one went to the San Francisco Examiner, and another went to the Chronicle. So that's arranged, if you merge them together, into a 24/17 grid. So 24/17 is 408 characters. So it gets the name the 408 or Z408. So this cipher has 54 distinct symbols, length 408. This was published in newspapers at the time, and it was clearly considered a challenge for people at home to try to crack. He did claim, I believe, that he had put his identity in the solution of this cipher. So the police requested help. From what I found, where their requests included the US Navy, the FBI, the California Bureau of Investigation, and the American Cryptogram Association. However, 9 days, I'll check that, maybe it was less than 9 days, after this cipher was published, the San Francisco Chronicle received a solution from a husband and wife team. Donald and Betty Harden managed to solve this sitting at home in their kitchen. So what did they do? The Harden's method. They made some assumptions and some guesses that turned out to be correct, and that led them down the right path. So they guessed that the double half-filled square would decrypt to double letters. The most common double letters in the English language are double L's. So the Hardens made a guess that a half-filled square and a filled square would decrypt to L's. Then they guessed that the following 4 symbols, a /, a UB, L, and so on, all decoded to the word kill. So that was a guess they made. So using that guess, the start of the cipher decodes as, just reading left to right, top to bottom, so no transposition, just homophonic encipherment. It decodes to I like killing, and so on and so on. That sort of got them off on the right path. And then A quote from Betty Harden was, "Solving the code was trial and error. We tried every combination backwards and forwards." They worked on it over the period of a weekend, and I believe they said it took about 20 hours of work for them to solve. This was their handwritten summary of their solution, where they've got the ciphertext and the underlying plaintext below it. At the end of the cipher were these final 18 characters, which nobody's ever been able to work out what they decode to, but there's strong evidence to suggest that they are just filler that was made to make the cipher into 3 equally sized segments. So if we fast forward half a century, what can we make of the 408? Well, there's amazing software by Joel van Acker called AZ Decrypt, which can solve homophonic substitution ciphers extraordinarily efficiently. So if you put the 408 into AZ Decrypt, it takes a fraction of a second for it to solve and get the underlying plaintext. So we can now consider these ciphers to be quite easily broken, especially with software like AZ Decrypt. Moving on to the 340, this is the cipher that's been unsolved for 51 years. So it was mailed into the Chronicle on November 9, which is, I think, 3 months after the 408. So this cipher is shorter. It's a 20 by 17 grid, and it contains 340 characters. So it's shorter than the 408, the previous cipher. And it uses more symbols. So I think the 408 used 52 symbols, 54 symbols, and this cipher uses 63 symbols. So 9 additional symbols and 68 less characters. So immediately it would be more difficult to solve, even if it's just a homophonic substitution cipher. But unlike the 408, his previous cipher, this one has survived constant attacks for 50 years. And this cipher has had a big target on its back. The head of the FBI's cryptographic unit, Dan Olson, said that this has been in the top 10 list of unsolved ciphers for 50 years that the FBI maintains. So that's a copy of the Zodiac's original rendering of this cipher. And you can see it's arranged into a highly regular grid, almost like he used like a stencil or something like that in order to get the letters arranged just so neatly. So a question would be, why do we care? I mean, this case has been unsolved for 51 years. There's a good chance the Zodiac is no longer alive. There is still a chance that the plaintext that is inside this would be of interest to investigators. The method of construction, so even if the plaintext that this cipher holds didn't reveal anything directly about him, maybe the method of construction could give clues to his education or background. From my point of view, the point of view of cryptography, I don't know a lot about this case, but from the point of view of cryptography, the solution to this problem would be a grand challenge. So there's been a number of academic papers written on methods of attack for solving this cipher. There's been a few master's theses. It's been thoroughly researched for a long time. To look at who's actually tried to solve this in the past, certainly the FBI has worked on it. I believe the NSA, the CIA, there's been a number of university projects. So Robert Graysmith's book Zodiac, which is what the 2007 movie is based from, it suggests of computer-based attacks on the 340 in the 1970s. So members of the American Cryptogram Association have tried to solve this, including their president, who helped to verify the solution of the 408. And then there's been a huge number of citizens who have tried to solve this, and a number of them tend to communicate on these sites, Zodiac Killer site, zodiackiller.com and zodiackillerfacts.com. On the right is an early summary of the FBI's analysis of the 340. That's about as much as I've been able to find in terms of what the FBI had originally done in terms of trying to solve this cipher. So this cipher hasn't been solved for 50 years. Maybe there's no message in here at all. Maybe it's just a random assignment of symbols designed to waste everybody's time. And if that's the case, the Zodiac's done very well. So if it is a random assignment of symbols, I'm going to try to zoom in here. I hope everybody can see it. If it is a random assignment of symbols, it would be interesting why the Zodiac chose to cross out a forward K and put in here a backwards K, because it just wouldn't matter if it was a random assignment of symbols. I'll see if I can zoom back out. Hopefully that's okay. So it had been speculated that this was a ploy to waste law enforcement's time, and this would be a completely valid explanation as to why this hasn't been solved for 50 years. So without a solution, is there a way in which we can distinguish between a genuine cipher and a random assignment of symbols? Well, we saw earlier that homophonic encipherment is a way to disguise the frequency of letters, but it's less good. That's a terrible term. It's not as good at disguising repeating bigrams, which are pairs of symbols. And the numbers of repeating bigrams can help us decide whether or not this is a genuine cipher. So to give you an idea, let's go to the 408 for a moment, the cipher that's been solved. So the most common repeating bigram in the 408 is a filled square and a B, and that has 6 occurrences. And you can see the ciphertext on the left and the plain text on the right. But by the nature of the encipherment scheme, because it's a homophonic encipherment, there are other ways to encode a double L. This isn't the only way. So the next most common repeating bigram is a backwards Q and a filled and an empty square, and that has 4 occurrences. In total, the 408 has 62 repeating bigrams. So length 408, 62 repeating bigrams. What about the 340? Well, it only has 25 repeating bigrams. And the question is, what do we make of that? How many bigrams should we expect, whether this is a genuine cipher or not? And one way to answer this question would be to compare the number of repeating bigrams from random shuffles of the 340 with randomly generated 340-like ciphers. So that is taking English plain text of length 340 and enciphering it such that we have 63 symbols and getting the same symbol distribution as the 340. So what do we get when we do this? So in this histogram, we have in green the frequency of the repeating bigram counts for random shuffles, and on the right we have in sort of a yellow type color the distribution of the bigrams for random 340-like ciphers. So we can see these are certainly distinct distributions, but they do overlap. And the question is, where does the 340 sit in relation to these two distributions, one describing the random shuffles and one describing 340-like ciphers? And you can see, hopefully, almost directly in the middle of this is the 340. So this is an interesting test, but it is inconclusive. So we can rerun this with, instead of repeating pairs of symbols or bigrams, we can rerun this with repeating triples of symbols, 3 symbols, trigrams. And once again, this is inconclusive. We can see that the random shuffles and the random 340-like ciphers, while they are different distributions, again, the 340 sits in a spot where we just can't tell. So previously, we saw that AZ Decrypt can efficiently solve the 408. Can it just solve the 340 and then we're done? Well, putting it into AZ Decrypt, we see the plain text that comes out of it is more or less gibberish. So the 340 cannot solve. AZ Decrypt cannot solve the 340. The question is, what do we make of that? So experiments indicate that AZ Decrypt can solve all ciphers of length 340 with the same symbol frequency and distribution as the 340. So that's not a good sign. But maybe it is gibberish, but let's suppose it's not. And let's suppose perhaps we're just not reading the cipher in the right direction. So we're going to assume the 340 is both a transposition cipher and a substitution cipher. And this idea was presented in an excellent presentation that David Aranchak gave in 2018 to the American Cryptogram Association. And so in this presentation, David statistically investigated the possibility that the 340 was enciphered with both homophonic substitution and transposition. And the one thing that really came out of this analysis that David did in this talk was something called a period 19. So left to right, top to bottom, taking every 19th character. So that produced 37 bigrams, which if we were to go back, I know this isn't a very good way to do it, but if we go back and look where 37 bigrams is in this histogram, that is significantly more weighted towards it being a real, genuine cipher than a random assignment of symbols. Sorry for that lack of flow. So this observation, this period 19 observation, was discovered independently in 2015 by a Zodiac killer site forum user called Daikon and Yal Van Eyck, the author of AZ Decrypt. So to give you an idea of what the period 19 transposition is, on the left, we have just a left to right, top to bottom enumeration, just how we would write out standard English. So on the right, what we do is we move, so left to right, top to bottom, we start in the top corner and we move along 19 symbols and then we put our second character. Then we move along 19 symbols and put our third character, 19 symbols, and so on and so on and so on. The reason why this is interesting, and this is probably why I need to go back to my previous histogram, but the reason why this is interesting is just how far this enumeration puts us in terms of this being a genuine cipher. So perhaps we're getting to the right reading direction. So the reason why I thought the period 19 transposition was interesting is the way in which it wraps around vertically. So it goes 19, 19, 19, 19, 19, all the way down until it gets to the final row. Then when it wraps around vertically, instead of going 19 positions, it only goes 18 positions. And then it continues going 19, 19, 19, 19. Then we get to the last row. Then we go 18 and so on. And if you compare that with a proper decimation of 19, that's on the right. So they look quite different, although they take similar diagonals through the cipher. So is this a correct transposition of the cipher? Can we just solve the cipher now using AZ Decrypt? And the answer is no. So we still haven't uncovered the correct reading direction or the correct transposition through the cipher. But statistically, the period 19 would suggest we're in the right direction. So where I come into this was I saw a connection between this period 19 and what's called a two-dimensional periodic decimation. So period 19 doesn't strike me as being a very natural way to write out a cipher. So the idea of a human counting along 19 positions every time they want to write out a character doesn't seem like something you would do, especially by pencil and paper in 1969. So I thought it might have been what's called a doubly periodic 1-2 decimation. And that means one down, two across. And that's mathematically given by this function, which just uses modular arithmetic to work out the correct indexes, which looks, seemingly convoluted, but geometrically it's very simple. It's just you start in the top right corner and you just move one down, two across, one down, two across, and you wrap around periodically, both horizontally and vertically. So if I jump out of this for 1 second, that would start at the top corner like this. Then we'd go one down, two across, and that's where we write our second character. One down, two across, one down, two across, one down, two across, one down, two across, and so on and so on and so on. And when we get down to the corner here, hopefully I've got that right, then we would go one down and then 1, 2 across would bring us to here. So we wrap around like it's on a torus or a donut. Let me just jump back into full screen there. So it follows very similar diagonals it has a very similar slope through the cipher. Now, the 1-2 decimation, just like period 19, although it's a different enumeration, it also has 37 bigrams. And we can compare them here. So on the left is the original period 19 that Daikon and Yal discovered. And on the right is the 1-2 doubly periodic decimation. So they look quite different, but they follow very similar slopes. So I thought David may like to know the connection between these. And so I reached out to him just through a YouTube comment and suggested to him that maybe he'd like to try this 1-2 decimation. And David responded, giving me his email address, and that's kind of how things got started between the two of us. We both tested the 1-2 decimation of the Z340 using AZ Decrypt and another program for solving homophonic substitution ciphers called ZK Decrypto. Neither of them came up with a solution. But in for a penny, in for a pound. Now I was hooked and I wasn't about to give up. David had spent a lot of time helping get me up to speed such that I could get to this point, and I wasn't about to give up. And so I became interested in looking at further transpositions. And what I was keen to do was not just look at 1 or 2 different transpositions, but I wanted to enumerate all possible transpositions of a given kind and turn this into a sort of quote unquote big data problem. So we ran these transpositions through AZ Decrypt and ZK Decrypto, and then we had additional software which would rank them and then analyze them for Zodiac-like words. To give you an idea of some of these, we had row major transpositions. So the color scheme here is just designed to give you an idea of the way in which we went through the cipher for our transposition. So row major transpositions. Moving alternatingly from the bottom of the cipher to the top and in both directions as you go up through the cipher. And then we had column major transpositions, both from the left, the right, the top, the bottom, and then simultaneously from both sides into the center. Then we had alternating row column transpositions, again, doing that from all 4 corners and alternating the direction you go down each row and each column. There were quite a few of those. And then we had inward spirals from all 4 corners and then outward spirals. And then we had diagonal transpositions, not to be confused with the decimations, but a different way of enumerating the cipher along diagonals. And again, there's quite a few of those. And then we had the proper 2-dimensional decimations. And I included all of them for completeness, but statistically that 1-2 decimation always stood out. I think there was like 128 of these. Some of these would be very, very unnatural to write out by hand. So we tested all of these, all of the row major, column major, alternating row column major, inward spirals, outward spirals, diagonals, proper 2D decimations. And that didn't turn up anything that looked like a solution to the 340. This will be a common theme, that we didn't turn up anything. So we then tested all pairs of these. So an example here would be to take our normal left to right, top to bottom, and then we would apply a left to right, right to left, right to left, alternating bottom to top transposition. I know that's a mouthful to say. And then we would apply the top left upper diagonal, and that would give us the following transposition. So that's a composition of 2 transpositions. And then we would run that through our homophonic substitution solver. So there's 53,000 pairs of those. Again, this did not turn up anything. So we then considered testing 3 tuples of these, so triplets of these transpositions. However, there's like 1.5 by 10 to the 15 or something of these to test. And if we could test 1 a second, we'd need like 5 million years. So what I thought was we would limit these to proper decimations, like our 1-2 decimation, and then we'd limit them just to transpositions that seemed reasonable to write out by hand. And what I mean by that is, for a human writing this out, a 1-1 decimation, 1 down, 1 across, seems quite normal or natural to write out. However, 13 down, 15 across does not seem like a natural way for a human to write this out. And so we just went for the ones that seemed reasonable to do by hand. And then we further limited these. We ran a sieve through them and just looked for enumerations that had a high bigram count. So again, this didn't turn up anything. So this is where the perseverance really comes in. So our experiments suggested that a composition of a transposition and a homophonic substitution doesn't solve the 340. Well, maybe there's another step we're missing. Maybe it's transposition, homophonic substitution, and something else. And so we experimented with splitting the cipher into 2 or more sections prior to doing the transposition. So for each of the candidate ciphers that we had, then we would then apply all of those transpositions. And then eventually what we would do is we would apply all combinations of transpositions, but this would get out of hand very quickly in terms of the numbers that we would have to check. So for example, in terms of splitting the cipher, we looked at splitting it into 2 vertical sections, 2 horizontal sections, and then 3 vertical sections and 3 horizontal sections, and then simultaneously 2 horizontal sections and 2 vertical sections, and for 3. So if we're doing this for all compositions of transpositions, then this would be a very large number of ciphers to test. So again, we had to be clever about the way in which we did this. We had to be selective. So given the high bigram count of the 1-2 decimation, we started off again with these reasonable decimations. Here's an example on the right of an example split. So in this case, we have split the cipher into 3 sections of vertical sizes 7, 8, and 5. And to each of those sections, we've applied the same transposition, which is the 3-3 decimation. So 3 rows down, 3 columns across, 3 rows down, 3 columns across to give that enumeration. So we ran all these possible 2D decimations for all possible splits. And again, like we'd seen, we didn't turn up anything. So the next search was for compositions of multiple transpositions. So applying one transposition to one section, another transposition to another section of the cipher, and so on. But this is a combinatorially large problem that was not going to be easily solved. So a little bit like turning a computer on and off again when it's not working, we decided to reanalyze some of the results that we'd already had. And so we reran, I think, the best, I'm going to say 10,000 or maybe the best 100,000 that we had in terms of scores coming from ZK Decrypto, just to see if giving any of those more time to run, it uses simulated annealing, amongst other things, to solve these ciphers, maybe giving it more time, more iterations would help. So the breakthrough came on Friday, the 4th of December, when David sent me a message about the following result that we had. So in this result, we had the following plain text that said, hope you are, and trying to catch me, and or the gas chamber. And I thought gas chamber seemed like an odd or a very interesting phrase that was included here. This one really stood out. So it goes to say that I was quite shocked. So that must have been 11:26 a.m. in the United States, because for me, that was like 1 in the morning, I think. So to give you an idea of this candidate that we found, it was the following. So split into 3 sections, the first one of size 9, the second one of size 9, and the third one just 2 rows. And the transposition, coincidentally, was this 1-2 decimation. So again, we're getting back to almost where we started, where we found a way to enumerate this that has those same statistics of a very high bigram count. So we can recreate this this solution that David found overnight while I was in bed. So the phrases "trying to catch me" and "gas chamber" appear here in a recreation that I did in AZ Decrypt. But we're not there yet, because we only had just a fragment of what might be a solution. And so David's idea was just to try to solve the first 9 lines of the cipher on its own. So forget about the rest of the cipher. Let's just see if we can get this part out. So doing that gives us nothing. You can see the results here on the right. It's mostly just complete gibberish. But AZ Decrypt has a really interesting feature called a crib feature, where we can lock in words that we think make sense. So locking in "hope you are" and "trying to catch me" and "gas chamber." So what happens there, those terms can no longer change. They're constraints now within the optimization process within AZ Decrypt. So then it will go and try to solve all the remaining for all the remaining symbols using these additional constraints. And with that, AZ Decrypt can solve the first 9 lines of the cipher in like a fraction of a second. And so this was the eureka moment. And so this is where we've got the first 9 lines of the cipher out. I was about to have a swim in Black Rock when I saw a message from David saying, "You must check your email," which was a strange, an unusual tone for David. And so I did. And that's when I found out that overnight he'd managed to get this far with solving the cipher. So the plain text was, I'm not particularly concerned with what the Zodiac had to say, but it says, "I hope you're having lots of fun in trying to catch me. That wasn't me on the TV show," which brings up a point about me. "I'm not afraid of the gas chamber because it will send me to paradise, all the." So that's the decryption of the first 9 lines. One reason why this is interesting, the phrase "that wasn't me on the TV show" was interesting because it was only a few weeks prior to this cipher being sent into the San Francisco Chronicle, that a person, unfortunately named Sam, called into the Jim Dunbar show, claiming to be the Zodiac, and spoke with a famous attorney for like 40 minutes on that show. So this was the Zodiac telling us that wasn't him who called in, that wasn't him calling into the TV show. So what about the rest of the cipher? Well, that's the first 9 lines that we've got. So we can crib all of the legible text from the first 9 lines. And then if we do that, does the rest of the cipher just fall out? Well, sort of, but not quite. Part of the next 9 lines kind of starts to make sense, but then it sort of goes off and we don't have a solution. So at this point, I certainly couldn't work out what had happened in the next 9 lines. And so David and I decided we'd contact Yael van Eyck, the author of AZ Decrypt. And Yael made a series of amazing observations. At this stage, I was at the gym when these emails came in from Yael, and it took him like an hour or 2, and he had the second section solved. It was amazing to watch. So he made the following observations. This is the untransposed section of the untransposed second section of the 340. So his observations were that the life is plain text here. That's to be read left to right. So we've applied the same key that we applied to the first 9 lines here, but we just haven't applied a transposition. So the second observation he made was that you exclude the life is portion from the 1-2 decimation. And then he noticed that numerous spelling mistakes are corrected if you move this H, which was originally at the end of this line, if you move it to this position and shift everything across 1 column. Again, an amazing observation. And then once you've done that, you just apply the 1-2 decimation that we had previously, like we had in the first section. So if you do that, you get the following. It says, "Sooner, because I now have enough slaves to work for me, where everyone else has nothing when they reach paradise, so they are afraid of death. I am not afraid because I know my new life is." And that seemed like a pretty good decryption of the second section of the cipher. So what about the last 2 lines? So if we apply the substitution key that we had for the previous two sections, we get that following text, which doesn't seem to make a huge amount of sense until you include some spaces in it. And then you notice that you can reverse, 5 words in there. So things like paradise are just spelt backwards. 1 is backwards, obviously, life is backwards. That seems like a pretty reasonable decryption of that section as well. So the final key and the transposition used for the 340 are given there. It was, extremely, extremely difficult to simultaneously find both of these. So David submitted this solution to the head of the FBI's cryptographic unit in a very sort of understated way. And that was on December 5, so on a Saturday. And we received an unofficial confirmation of our solution. I say later that day. I think for me it was on the Sunday, the day after. So it got confirmed, and it was sent back from the FBI's cryptographic unit to the FBI San Francisco, which was the office that requested the help. And the FBI requested we didn't make this solution public until they'd had a chance to go and notify victims and descendants and relatives and whatnot of the victims. And so we were left sitting on this result for 7 days, which was really difficult, but we wanted to respect the FBI's process. And eventually the following tweet that's on the right there came out. So they don't comment on open cases, but they were aware that the cipher had been solved by a group of private citizens. We were told by the FBI to expect a deluge of press. I naively thought this might have been something that would appear in like maybe the San Francisco Chronicle, for example, because this is where the 340 was originally sent by the Zodiac 51 years ago. So it appeared in the San Francisco Chronicle. It was actually covered by Kevin Fagan, who's a longtime Zodiac reporter. And an infrequent visitor to Australia as well. So it was covered by the San Francisco Chronicle, but it was also covered by like every other major news outlet in the world. We were the top story in the New York Times up until I think one of Trump's challenges to the Supreme Court knocked us off. It was covered in the Los Angeles Times, CNN, the New York Post, 10 Boston, USA Today, the list just goes on and on. It made it to the UK, The Sun. There was a fantastic article written by Michael Coggan here in Australia for ABC News, which covered this, a really detailed summary of what we had done. It was also in The Age, which I read on a frequent basis here in Australia. The press on this was hard to fathom. I think I did something like 30 interviews in the span of like a week after this came out. It's probably worth reflecting on the solution a little bit and why the Zodiac went about it the way in which he did. The correct transposition has 45 repeating bigrams. So you can see where the 340 sits in terms of its repeating bigram count and where the 340 with the correct transposition sits. So he had to go to some length to try to disguise that bigram count, and he did very well. The transposition he chose was extremely obscure. So reflecting on the difficulty of the 340. So the 408, his first cipher was solved within a week. His second cipher took 51 years to solve with computing power that was unimaginable in 1969. That's the year man first went to the moon. So the Zodiac clearly wanted to make his second cipher more difficult, but the question was just how much more difficult did he intend to make it? I think the phrase, "that wasn't me on the TV show," that was in the plain text, I think that indicated he wanted this information known relatively quickly. But what does this say? So there's a vast increase in difficulty between the 340. What does this say about the Zodiac's cryptographic skills? Well, maybe he was only skilled in creating ciphers. Maybe he didn't have the ability to sit down and reason with pencil and paper on the back of an envelope and just decide estimate just how difficult this cipher would have been to solve. That's one of my takeaways from this, was maybe he was skilled in creating these ciphers, but not necessarily breaking them. Maybe he left a hint. Hindsight is a wonderful thing, but this is the envelope that the 340 was sent to the San Francisco Chronicle. And on the back, he's written, "Please rush to the editor," along a slope that's suspiciously similar, now that we know, to the slopes that the 1-2 decimation takes through the cipher. Was this a hint? I don't know. It's a reasonable conjecture now that we know it, I suppose. Could this have been used as a hint otherwise? I don't know. Possibly not. I mean, future directions. There are other unsolved ciphers here in the Zodiac case. There's 2 other unsolved ciphers. One of them is, of course, particularly attractive because he claims his name is here. I'd like to write a paper on this with David and Jarl. And I'd also like to use deep learning-based approaches to see if we can solve all 340-like ciphers. So now we know how this thing is put together. Maybe deep learning can be used to solve all 340-like ciphers. I have a couple of ideas for ways in which maybe you could use the solution of the 340 to solve these 2 remaining ciphers. But the length of these ciphers would make it very, very difficult to, or essentially impossible to, prove that you've found the unique solution to these ciphers. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to get financial support from the University of Melbourne to help me further this research. Hopefully, that's something that will change in the near future. But the response from the rest of the world has been just hard to fathom. So we've been approached by well over a dozen production companies that want to create a multi-part documentary series on the Zodiac and these ciphers and our work on solving the 340. We've also been approached by some book publishers wanting us to write a book on this work, which I'm not really a book writer, but maybe somebody will write something about it one day. I need to make some acknowledgements. I would have never become involved with solving the 340 if it wasn't for the amazing video series that David put together on the Zodiac ciphers. We wouldn't have been able to solve the 340 without AZ Decrypt, which was written by Yael Van Acker, and ZK Decrypto, which was written by Brax Cisco, Wesley Hopper, and Michael Eaton. We stood on the shoulders of a lot of efforts from other people, including the online community at Zodiac Killer site, zodiackiller.com and zodiackillerfacts.com. Much of their work laid the groundwork for what we eventually did. I used the University of Melbourne High Performance Compute Cluster Spartan to eliminate and score many of these candidate transpositions. And I thank them for the use of that computer. And of course, I would have never been able to solve this without David and Yael, the two people who I worked on this with. So a special thank you to those guys. And just lastly, I mean, this has generated a lot of interest and what have you, but it's important to remember that this is an open case. And so we'd like to dedicate this solution to the Zodiac Killer's victims, their families and descendants. And it would be amazing if one day there was some way to find justice for these people. Thank you. I think at this point we'll take some questions if we have any.
Thank you very much, Sam. If you have any questions, then please open up the Q and answer icon or window and put your question in. There's no question yet. So maybe I will start to fill gap. Sam, so you mentioned some further work. So the one cryptogram you showed is very short. So I don't know how you can actually crack it, having such a small amount of material. This is almost like if you are trying to guess, you may actually get a lot of wrong answers.
Yes, absolutely. I think it would be impossible to prove that you found a unique solution. The only hope might be if, say, for example, the key that was used to solve the 340 would also be used to solve that cipher, or maybe a hybrid of the keys from the 408 and the 340 were possibly used to solve those codes. Or maybe it's something more exotic where once you've used those keys, it becomes almost like a word search or something like that within the solution of the 340. Maybe by the time the Zodiac sent that "my name is Cipher," he was so confident that the 340 wouldn't be solved that you actually need the solution of the 340 in order to solve these remaining ciphers. These are open questions. They would be very difficult to solve.
Okay. Now I have a question from Dali. Any indications of how neural networks would help?
No, I will know more once we actually start the process, once we start the project. I've spoken to some friends of mine who work directly in this space, and they think it would be relatively straightforward. However, I'm looking forward to seeing just how difficult or easy it actually is.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Hassan Asgar asks you, can you tell us more about Zodiac-like ciphers? Are these from other serial killers?
So I'm not an expert on either serial killers or or their communications. I believe it's something that other serial killers and other criminals have tried in the past, is communicating using ciphers, but I don't really know, to be honest. There are certainly others, but I'm not an expert on them at all.
So next question is from Fiona McTavish. Have you thought about crowdsourcing funding?
Maybe we should start a GoFundMe page. That would be interesting. I think if we were going to have done that, maybe our window has passed. Maybe we should have done that in December or something. But I haven't thought about that. No.
Okay. So this is a comment. Great talk, by the way, Hassan Asghar.
Thank you, Hassan.
Lisa Middlebrook, have you been in contact with any of the victims' families? What has been their reaction? So, well, I mean, if you haven't, then there's no reaction.
Yeah, no, we haven't. No, I mean, I approach this as a problem in cryptography. I'm not sure how comfortable I would be communicating with them about this stuff. I just don't think I have a lot of, and I'm not sure how I'd be able to help, to be honest, beyond what we've already done.
So now you have your question from your co-author, Dave. He's asking you, which unsolved ciphers do you want to work on the next after remaining Zodiac ciphers?
Yeah, this might be a reminder from Dave that I think we were thinking about working on the Kryptos cipher, which is a sculptor outside the CIA's building in, where's the CIA building, Dave? Maybe in Virginia somewhere, I think.
So could you actually tell us a little bit more about this cipher? Because I haven't heard about it.
So it's an enormous sculpture that contains 4 ciphers. It's like a giant piece of, I'm guessing it's like bronze or something like that. And the ciphers are actually carved into it. And 3 of the 4 ciphers that are in it have been solved, and one hasn't been solved. And I think it was created in like the very early 1990s, something like that. And so that would be fun to work on. Otherwise, there was a code left on the Somerton man, which is an open case in Australia, to try to work out who this person was. That might be fun to work on. I'm really not sure, to be honest, what's going to be the next one that we really sort of get stuck into.
Okay, thank you. Dali, again, in particular, since the ciphers are different from one text to the other, the hope would be that the keys are dependent in one way or the other. So
yes, that would be amazing.
Yeah,
that would be fantastic. If there was some relationship between the keys of the 408, the keys of the 340, and the remaining 2 ciphers, that would be great. One of the problems is the remaining 2 ciphers actually have a number of symbols in them that do not appear in either the 408 or the 340. So I guess they would just have to be wildcards that we'd have to try to figure out what they are. But yes, if something like that was to exist, that would be amazing.
Yeah, okay, that would be a lot of clues for you. Next question from Lisa Middlebrook again. Is the FBI actively working with you and encouraging you to try to decipher his name? Oh, so that's the cipher text you are probably intend to work. Do you believe you can do it? Probably yes, the answer is.
So the answer is no. So David and I, well, unless David is, sworn to secrecy or something like that, we're not working directly with the FBI to solve the remaining ciphers. No. Okay. Do you believe you can do it? No. I think you could run a computer program that would find thousands of candidate solutions to those ciphers, and then trying to prove that one is any more valid than another would be impossible.
Yeah, that's one of my guess as well. So Kate Olsen, in the beginning, when you first discussed substitution cryptograms, the example starts with an X, but I believe in your key above X is equal E. Oh, I made
You,
something wrong. Is this right?
Kate, you may well be right. I would have to look at that more
Yeah,
closely.
it looks like maybe typo.
There's a chance there's a typo there. Yes, I'm not sure. Would that be the X from X marks the spot, maybe in the example of the homophonic or the simple encipherment? There could well be. Yes, there could well be a problem with that. I'll have a look. Thank you.
Okay. David asks, do you think the Zodiac killer is Arthur Allen?
Yeah, so I get contacted all the time by people asking me who I think the Zodiac killer is. I have absolutely no idea. If you read Robert Graysmith's book, he certainly singled out Arthur Lee Allen as the Zodiac. Other people are not so sure. I honestly do not know. If this case was going to be solved from here, it's probably going to be solved using like DNA and genealogy, I would imagine.
Okay. Another question from Vedant. Why did you use two different programs for decryption?
That's a good question. So David was predominantly using AZ Decrypt. I was predominantly using ZK Decrypto. AZ Decrypt is sort of a follow-on program from ZK Decrypto. I believe ZK Decrypto was the first program that could solve the 408 automatically. And AZ Decrypt can certainly do that, and it has a number of other features that make it a lot faster than ZK Decrypto. The reason I was using ZK Decrypto is that there is a Linux binary for it, so I could put that straight onto Melbourne University's cluster and run it. Whereas AZ Decrypt is written in BASIC and it's a Windows program, so I would have had to set up like Wine or something like that on the Melbourne University computer in order to run that there, which sounded to me like it was too difficult. I mean, I was only working on this problem for like a couple of hours a week, and so I didn't really want to put in the time to try to set up AZ Decrypt and Wine on the cluster to then run on 300 or 400 threads or something like that simultaneously to try to solve this cipher. So it was purely just, it was easier for me to use ZK Decrypto in a Linux environment.
Okay, thank you. Akrita Singh, as you have mentioned that 340 should be a key to solving the next cipher, do you think Zodiac Killer would not have thought that 340 could be solved?
Maybe by the time he wrote the 13-character cipher, the 340 hadn't been solved for, I'm guessing it was something like over a year. And so maybe he had gained more faith in the of how secure his encipherment was of the 340. But again, it's just speculation. I mean, we're speculating that the 13-character cipher may be related to the 340, but again, we don't have anything really to back that up. It's all just conjecture at this point.
So Dave asked you another question.
Oh, he's just answered my question. It's on the grounds of the CIA, the crypto.
Oh, okay, good. And then next question, Dali is asking, I am really keen to know about the connection of this work with prior research in crypto. Also, could you tell us a bit more about how the international research community has reacted to this finding? Okay, yeah.
So the international research community probably moves quite slowly. So we may get more of an indication of how much they like our work when we try to publish a paper on this. We've had a lot of people reach out to us congratulating us on what we had done. Even some of the people on the forums that have been trying to solve this suggested that we had solved this too quickly, and they haven't had a chance to look into a lot of analyses of the 340 that they were hoping to do before it was solved. Yeah, I mean, everyone's been very positive in terms of what we had done here. In terms of prior research into this work, I mean, the main thing that we really needed here was, one, we needed compute power in order to do this, but two, we needed a really efficient homophonic substitution cipher solver, which is what Jal van Eyck wrote. And looking at the source code of that, it's something like 38,000 lines of Visual Basic that he wrote in his spare time, which is a significant undertaking. And without it, we would not have been able to solve this.
Did you actually thought about sending some paper at the crypto or Eurocrypt conference? This could be of interest, I think. If not to the normal session, then probably a ramp session would be terrific, I think.
Yeah, so we are planning on writing a paper, and we have got a very thin sort of skeleton of our paper put together thus far. And it's really probably up to we need to crack the whip and actually get going on writing it, I think. But we've been distracted by other things since all this has come out. But we will write a paper about this in the near future.
Probably the last question, Rana Salal Ali. Did you at some point thought of giving up? What kept you going?
That's a good question to round this out on. So I worked on this for around 8 to 10 months, I think. But I've been communicating with Dave for over a year. I sort of started working on this in my spare time because I'd been working on another unsolved problem that's been unsolved since the early 1960s. And I've been working on that problem for 15 years in my spare time. I like long-term unsolved problems. I think I have good patience for them. Did I think about giving up on this one? I hadn't, no. I mean, David had been working on this problem for like well over 10 years. And so maybe he had at different times. But what kept me going was it was interesting. Even not finding the answer is still interesting, I think. It almost feels like you eventually start to pigeonhole it, right? Because you work out all these areas where you seemingly think you haven't found a solution, so you can kind of push them aside and you feel like you're still sort of working in the right direction to a solution. I didn't think of giving up, no. Maybe in 5 to 10 years or something like that, I would have given up, or the University of Melbourne would have stopped giving me access to their computer or something like that to run this silly problem on.
Sam, we can actually stop here, but there are another probably 3 or questions. Are you happy to go and answer? Because it's after 3 o'clock and we probably have
Yeah, let me just answer David's question here, because I think it's a really good one. So how do we know that the solution is right? So other people have other solutions that they've come up with in the past. So Robert Graysmith has a solution that he put in his book from the 1980s. So that solution required not only coming up with a key, but then he had to use a lot of anagramming and sort of including letters where it suited him, removing letters where it suited him, in order to get some text that still didn't really read like it was English. Our solution isn't forced. We have a key for our solution. We have a way in which we read the cipher, and that's it. The only thing we've done is, we've corrected like a couple of words, like I think bringo, B-R-I-N-G-O, gets corrected to brings and things like that. Our solution didn't require anagramming. It didn't require artistic creativity, like a way of sort of massaging the cipher into a form that we needed it to be in to get out what we wanted. I had, like David and Yal and I had no control over the plain text that was in the solution. It wasn't forced. And that's a reasonable measure of correctness or rightness in this.
Okay, you probably see the question and answer as well. Probably we covered more or less everything, unless you would like to elaborate on something else.
I think so. Yeah, Dali would be happy to talk about Eurocrypt and a workshop on this. That would be very interesting. I mean, one thing we'd probably like to do down the track is turn this methodology that we ended up using to solve the 340 into a reusable system. But that would be no short undertaking to do something like that.
Good. Sam, thank you very much for a wonderful talk. I enjoyed it very much. I hope that anybody else did as well. I would like to obviously, thank you very much. And also I would like to thank Dali and Sideh Modaber and the team from Macquarie to help organizing this seminar. Thank you very much again, and see you next time.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.